Liberal IRS employee discriminates against Karoline Leavitt. Trump then fires. Karoline Leavitt stepped out of her sleek black SUV into the gray morning haze of Washington, D.C., her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. The IRS building loomed ahead, a monolith of bureaucracy with its concrete facade and rows of narrow windows that seemed to squint at passers-by. Today, April 14, 2025, she carried a folder thick with documents, tax filings for her family's real estate ventures, a project tied to her husband, Nicholas Rio. Normally she'd delegate such errands, but this time she wanted to handle it herself, a quiet act of independence, a chance to prove she could navigate the mundane as deftly as she handled White House press briefings. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer and cream blouse, Karoline felt a familiar confidence, though a faint flutter of nerves danced in her chest. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, and a subtle smile curved her lips as she pushed through the glass doors. The IRS lobby was sterile. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled faintly of paper and cleaning solution. A large sign near the entrance proclaimed, "Serving all Americans fairly." Karoline's eyes lingered on it, a flicker of irony crossing her mind. She'd faced enough bias to know such promises often rang hollow. The line was short, and she approached the counter, where a teller, a woman in her late 30s with short auburn hair and a name tag reading Melissa Grant, stood sorting papers. Melissa's eyes flicked up as Karoline reached the counter, and something shifted in her expression, a tightening of the lips, a narrowing of the gaze. Karoline recognized that look. She'd seen it in press rooms, on social media, even at coffee shops. It was the look of someone who'd already judged her. "Good morning," Karoline said, her voice steady and professional as she slid the folder across the counter. "I'm here to file these documents for a business account." Melissa didn't respond immediately. She took the folder, flipping it open with deliberate slowness, her fingers lingering on the pages, as if searching for something to "Business account, huh?" she said finally, her tone clipped. "Karoline Leavitt," she replied, bracing herself. She knew her name carried weight. White House press secretary, vocal Trump supporter, a lightning rod for controversy in a city that leaned hard left. Melissa's eyes snapped up, recognition sparking like a match. "Leavitt," she repeated, loud enough for the man at the next counter to glance over. "As in the Karoline Leavitt?" Her voice dripped with something between disdain and mockery, and Karoline felt a flush of heat creep up her neck. She'd faced hostility before, but its brazenness in a federal office caught her off guard. "Yes," Karoline said evenly, refusing to take the bait. "These are the filings for Resio Properties. Everything's in order. Tax forms, verification, and the project contract." Melissa smirked, a small, cutting gesture that didn't reach her eyes. She set the folder down, leaning forward slightly. "For someone like you, we need to be extra careful," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet lobby. A woman in line behind Karoline shifted uncomfortably, and the man at the next counter whispered something to his companion. "Big names, big money, it doesn't just slide through here." Caroline Ann's heart thudded, but years of facing hostile reporters had honed her composure. "I've provided all the required documents," she said firmly, nudging the folder closer. "If there's an issue, please let me know so I can address it." Melissa didn't touch the folder again. Instead, she crossed her arms, her gaze raking over Karoline as if sizing up an opponent. "Oh, I'll check it," she said. "But don't expect me to rush. People like you think you can waltz in and get special treatment. Not here." The words hit like a slap, their implication clear. People like you wasn't about her paperwork, it was about her politics, her role in Trump's administration, the conservative values she'd championed since her House campaign in New Hampshire. Karoline clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. She wanted to fire back, to demand respect, but she knew escalation could play into Melissa's hands. Instead, she took a deep breath, channeling the calm she'd mastered in high-stakes briefings. "There's no need for that tone," Karoline said, her voice low but sharp. "I'm here as a taxpayer, same as anyone. Process the filings or tell me what's missing." Melissa's smirk widened, as if Karoline's restraint amused her. She picked up the folder, flipping through it with exaggerated care, muttering loud enough for others to hear. "Real estate, huh? Probably some shady deal tied to him." The him was unspoken but obvious. Trump, the man whose shadow loomed over every room Karoline entered. Karoline felt her pulse quicken. She glanced around, noticing the lobby's attention shifting toward her. A young woman in a hoodie with a progressive slogan gave a subtle nod to Melissa, as if in approval. An older man in a suit frowned, sensing the tension. The air felt charged, like a stage where Karoline had been cast as the villain without her consent. She pulled out her phone, opening the Notes app, a habit from her White House days when she learned to document everything. Melissa Grant, IRS teller, 9:22 a.m., hostile tone, implies bias due to my politics. Her fingers moved quickly, grounding her anger in action. She wouldn't let this slide, but she needed evidence, not just emotions. Melissa noticed the phone and snorted. What, texting your boss already? Gonna cry to the White House? Her voice rose, drawing more eyes. This isn't a press conference, Miss Leavitt. You don't get to control the narrative here. Karoline met her gaze, unflinching. I'm not crying to anyone, she said, her voice steady as steel. I'm making sure this is handled fairly. If you can't do that, I'll speak to your supervisor. The threat landed, and Melissa's smirk faltered for a split second. But she recovered quickly, leaning back in her chair. Go ahead, she said, waving a hand. Supervisors don't have time for people who think they're above the rules. You'll wait like everyone else. Karoline's jaw tightened. She knew Melissa was stalling, turning a simple filing into a power play. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:30 a.m. She'd been here less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. The lobby was filling up, and the whispers grew louder. A man in a flannel shirt muttered to his wife, "Is that the Trump lady? What's she doing here?" The wife shook her head, her expression sour. Karoline felt exposed, like a spotlight had pinned her in place. She thought of Nicholas, waiting at home with their son Nico, probably building a tower of blocks or chasing the dog. She'd promised to be quick, to join them for lunch. But now, this errand was spiraling into something else. A test of her resolve, a reminder that her public role made even routine tasks a battlefield. Another employee, a young man named Ethan with wire-rimmed glasses, appeared behind the counter, sorting files. He glanced at Karoline, his expression neutral but curious, as if he sensed the tension but wasn't part of it. She caught his eye, giving a slight nod, hoping for an ally. Ethan hesitated, then looked away, returning to his work. Karoline's heart sank, but she didn't dwell on it. She'd learned long ago not to expect others to fight her battles. Melissa, meanwhile, turned to a new customer, a woman in a bright scarf who'd just approached the counter. "Don't worry, I'll help you right away," she said, her voice suddenly warm, almost syrupy. The contrast was stark: hostility for Karoline, hospitality for someone else. Karoline noted it. Melissa favors other customers. 9:32 a.m. She stepped back slightly, leaning against a pillar to observe. The lobby was a microcosm of DC, divided, judgmental, quick to pick sides. She saw Melissa laugh with the scarf woman, processing her paperwork with efficiency. Karoline could only dream of. When a man in a jacket with a conservative logo approached another teller, he was told to wait a moment, with a curt tone. The pattern was clear, and it wasn't just about her. Karoline's phone buzzed, a text from Nicholas. "Everything okay? You've been gone a while," she typed back quickly. "Trouble at IRS. Handling it." Don't worry yet. She wasn't ready to pull him into this. She wanted to face Melissa herself, to prove she could stand her ground without leaning on anyone, even her husband. The clock ticked on, each second stretching. Melissa returned to Karoline's folder. Flipping through it again, her lips pursed. "This contract looks complicated," she said. "Loud enough for us to hear. We've had issues with real estate filings before. Especially from certain people." The jab was unmistakable, tying Karoline's paperwork to her political allegiance. Karoline felt a surge of anger, but she channeled it into clarity. "If there's a specific problem, name it," she said, her voice cutting through the lobby's hum. "I've filed similar documents before. They're standard." Melissa shrugged, setting the folder aside. "Standard for you, maybe. We'll need to verify everything. Could take hours. Maybe days." She smiled, a cold, triumphant curve of the lips. "You're welcome to wait." Karoline's fists clenched tighter. She knew Melissa wasn't just delaying her. She was trying to humiliate her, to make her feel small in front of everyone. She thought of her father's words from childhood, "Truth always wins, but you have to fight for it." She wasn't about to let Melissa win this round. She glanced around, spotting a supervisor's office in the corner, its door half open. She could march over, demand action, but she hesitated. Escalating now might give Melissa ammunition to paint her as entitled, disruptive. Instead, she pulled out her phone again, adding to her notes, "Melissa delays filing, implies fraud, 9:40 a.m. She needed more than words, she needed proof of this bias. Suddenly, another customer approached the counter, a woman in a blazer with a rainbow pin on her lapel. Melissa greeted her with a beaming smile. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her tone so friendly it bordered on performative. The woman handed over a thin stack of papers, and Melissa processed them in minutes, chatting warmly about a local charity event. Karoline watched, her stomach twisting. The injustice was blatant, and it wasn't just about her paperwork anymore. She stepped forward again, her voice calm but firm. "Miss Grant, I've waited long enough. If you're not going to process my filings, I want to know why, and I want it on record." Melissa's smile vanished. She leaned forward, her voice low but venomous. "You don't tart me, Leavitt. You and your kind think you own this country, but not here. Not on my counter." The words were a gut punch, raw and unfiltered. Karoline felt the lobby's eyes on her, some curious, some hostile. She knew Melissa wasn't just attacking her, she was attacking everything she stood for, from her faith to her loyalty to Trump. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She'd faced worse. Sneering reporters, viral hit pieces, even threats during her campaign. A teller's insults wouldn't break her. "I'm not here to fight," Karoline said, her voice ringing clear. "I'm here to file taxes. If you can't do your job, I'll make sure someone else does." Melissa laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Go ahead, call whoever you want. No one's gonna side with Trump's mouthpiece over me." The lobby went quiet, the air thick with tension. Karoline felt a chill, not of fear but of clarity. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the principle, about fairness, about exposing bias in a system that claimed neutrality. She thought of Nico, of the world she wanted him to grow up in. One where truth mattered more than labels. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a number she rarely used but always kept close. Her thumb hovered over the contact, Donald J. Trump. She hadn't planned to call him, hadn't wanted to escalate this far, but Melissa's defiance left her no choice. She hit the call button, her heart pounding as the line rang. "Karoline?" Trump's voice came through, gruff but warm, instantly recognizable. "What's going on? You okay?" She stepped away from the counter, lowering her voice. "Sir, I'm at the IRS trying to file taxes for Nicholas's business. The teller's refusing to process my documents, insulting me, targeting me for my politics. It's blatant bias, and she's not backing down." Trump's tone sharpened. "What's her name?" "Melissa Grant," Karoline said, glancing at the counter where Melissa was now pretending to shuffle papers, her eyes darting nervously toward her. "She's delaying everything, making it personal. I've got notes, proof of how she's treating me." "That's unacceptable," Trump said, his voice rising. "Nobody treats my people like that, nobody." "Stay there, Karoline. I'm handling this." The call ended, and Karoline slipped the phone back into her pocket, her pulse still racing. She felt a mix of relief and resolve. She hadn't wanted to pull rank, but Melissa's actions demanded accountability. She returned to the counter, meeting Melissa's gaze head-on. "You done with your little call?" Melissa sneered, but her voice wavered, as if she sensed something shifting. Karoline didn't respond, letting the silence speak for her. She leaned against the pillar again, watching the lobby. Ethan, the other employee, glanced at her, his expression unreadable but softer than before. The clock ticked on, 9:50 a.m. The wait felt endless, but Karoline knew Trump's intervention would be swift. Minutes later, the supervisor's door swung open, and a man in a gray suit emerged, his face tense. He held a phone to his ear, nodding rapidly, his eyes scanning the lobby until they landed on Karoline. He hung up, striding toward the counter with purpose. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice professional but strained. "I'm Robert Kessler, branch supervisor. I just received a call from a high-level office. Can you explain what's happened here? Karoline stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. I came to file business taxes. Miss Grant refused to process my documents, delayed me for nearly an hour, and insulted me, implying my political affiliations make me untrustworthy. She's favored other customers while targeting me. I have notes documenting everything. Kessler's jaw tightened. He turned to Melissa, who'd gone pale, her hands frozen on the counter. Is this true? He asked, his tone sharp. Melissa stammered, her confidence crumbling. Yeah, I was just being thorough. She's blowing it out of proportion. You know how these people are. Enough, Kessler snapped, cutting her off. He took Karoline's folder, flipping through it quickly. These documents are in order. There's no reason for a delay. Melissa, his voice cold. You're suspended, effective immediately. Gather your things and leave. Melissa's mouth dropped open, her eyes wide with shock. You can't, you're firing me over her. She's lying. I said leave, Kessler repeated, nodding to a security guard who'd appeared nearby. We'll discuss this further after an investigation, but you're done here for now. The guard stepped forward, and Melissa grabbed her purse. Her movements jerky, her face a mix of fury and disbelief. She shot Karoline a venomous glare. You think you've won? She hissed. This isn't over. Karoline didn't flinch. I didn't come here to win, she said quietly. I came to do what's right. Melissa stormed out, the glass doors swinging shut behind her. The lobby buzzed with murmurs, some customers whispering in approval, others shaking their heads. Karoline felt their eyes on her, but she stood tall, her shoulders squared. She'd faced the storm and come through. Kessler turned to her, his expression apologetic. Miss Leavitt, I'm deeply sorry for this. Your filings will be processed immediately. This won't happen again. Thank you, Karoline said, her voice steady but tired. She handed over the folder, watching as Ethan stepped up to handle it, his movements efficient and respectful. She felt a flicker of gratitude for his quiet decency, a contrast to Melissa's venom. As she waited for the receipt, Karoline's phone buzzed again. Another text from Nicholas. Heard what happened. You okay? Coming home soon? She smiled faintly. Typing back, I'm fine. Be home soon. Love you. The transaction complete. Karoline stepped outside, the spring air cool against her skin. She paused, looking up at the IRS building, its sign about fairness now a challenge rather than a promise. She thought of Nico, of the values she wanted to instill, resilience, truth, courage. Today she'd fought for those, not just for herself, but for anyone who'd faced bias in a system meant to serve all. Back home, she hugged Nico tightly, his laughter a balm to the day's tension. Nicholas pulled her close, his eyes searching hers. You did good, he said, his voice warm. Proud of you. Karoline nodded, gazing out the window as the DC skyline glowed under the setting sun. The weight of the day lingered, but so did a quiet sense of triumph. She'd faced injustice head-on, and though the victory wasn't without cost, it was hers, she knew. This wouldn't be the last battle, but for now she'd stood her ground, and that was enough. Karoline Leavitt sat at her kitchen table that evening, a steaming mug of chamomile tea, warming her hands. Nico was asleep upstairs, his soft snores drifting through the baby monitor, and Nicholas was in his study, reviewing contracts for the real estate project that had sparked today's ordeal. The house was quiet, but Karoline's mind churned. The confrontation at the IRS replayed like a looping reel. Melissa's sneers, the lobby's whispers, the moment she'd dialed Trump. She opened her phone, rereading her notes. Melissa Grant, hostile, biased, 9:22 a.m. The words were a lifeline, anchoring her to the truth when emotions threatened to pull her under. She thought of calling her mother, a woman who'd always urged her to stand firm but stay kind. Instead, she pulled out a notepad, jotting down thoughts for a potential statement. As press secretary, she knew how fast stories spread, especially ones tied to her name. By morning, the IRS incident could be fodder for blogs, ex-posts, or worse, twisted into a narrative that painted her as the aggressor. She needed to be ready. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. A message from a colleague at the White House. Heard about the IRS thing. You okay? People are talking. Karoline sighed, typing back, I'm fine. Just another day in the spotlight. Thanks for checking. The people are talking part gnawed at her. She opened X, scrolling through her mentions. Sure enough, a few posts had already surfaced. Some praising her for standing up to liberal bias. Others calling her entitled for pulling strings. One user wrote, Karoline Leavitt, cries victim again. Typical MAGA move. She closed the app, her jaw tight. The truth was hers, but the world would spin it as it pleased. Nicholas appeared in the doorway, his shirt sleeves rolled up, concern etched into his face. You're still thinking about it, aren't you? He said, leaning against the frame. Can't help it, Karoline admitted, setting her mug down. It wasn't just about me, Nick. It was the way she acted, like she had the right to judge me, to punish me for who I am. And I know she's not alone. He crossed the room, sitting beside her. You handled it like a pro. Trump stepping in? That's a power move most people only dream of. He grinned, but it faded when he saw her expression. What's eating you? Karoline traced the rim of her mug. I didn't want to call him. I wanted to fix it myself, to prove I could. But she pushed me too far. And now I wonder, did I just make things worse? For us? For the narrative? Nicholas took her hand, his grip steady. You did what you had to. That woman crossed a line, multiple lines. You didn't make this political. She did. Karoline nodded, but doubt lingered. She thought of Melissa's face as she left, the mix of anger and fear in her eyes. Part of her felt a pang of empathy. Melissa was wrong, but she was human, likely caught in her own web of beliefs. Yet Karoline couldn't ignore the betrayal of fairness, the way Melissa's bias had turned a federal office into a battleground. The next morning, Karoline woke to a flood of notifications. The story had broken, as she'd feared. A conservative outlet ran a headline, Trump's press secretary targeted by liberal IRS worker. A left-leaning blog countered, Leavitt abuses power, gets teller fired over routine delay. Both missed the nuance, but that was DC. Truth was a casualty of clicks. She dressed for work, choosing a sharp red blazer, a silent declaration of defiance. Nico hugged her legs before she left, his tiny hands leaving crumbs on her skirt. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "Be good for Daddy," and headed out. At the White House, the press room buzzed with anticipation. Karoline knew the IRS incident would come up. It always did when her name trended. She stepped to the podium, her notes crisp in her hands, her expression calm but resolute. The first question was predictable, from a reporter with a skeptical tilt to his glasses. Miss Leavitt, can you confirm reports that you had an IRS employee fired yesterday after a dispute? Some say you leveraged your position unfairly. Care to comment? Karoline met his gaze, her voice steady. I went to the IRS to file taxes. Like any American, the employee in question refused to process my documents, insulted me, and targeted me for my political beliefs. I provided evidence of her misconduct, and her supervisor made a decision based on that. I didn't ask for special treatment. I asked for fairness. The room erupted with follow-ups, but Karoline navigated them with precision, honed by years of deflecting loaded questions. She didn't mention Trump's call, knowing it would inflame the narrative. Instead, she focused on principle. No one should face discrimination for their views, left or right. That's not what this country's about. Back in her office, she exhaled. The adrenaline fading. Her phone rang, Trump's name flashed on the screen. She answered, bracing herself. Karoline, great job out there, he said, his voice booming. You showed him strength, that teller? She's done, I made sure of it. Nobody messes with my team. Karoline hesitated, gratitude mixing with unease. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your support. I hope this doesn't fuel more division. Trump chuckled. Division's already here, Karoline. You just keep fighting the good fight. We're winning. Believe me. The call ended, and Karoline stared at her desk, the weight of his words settling in. She'd won, but at what cost? Melissa's firing was justice, yet it would be spun as vengeance. Sai opened her notes from yesterday, reading the timeline again. Melissa implies fraud, 9:40 a.m. It grounded her, a reminder that she'd acted on evidence, not impulse. Over the next week, the IRS incident faded from headlines, replaced by fresher controversies. Karoline learned through a contact that Melissa had been officially terminated after an investigation confirmed her pattern of bias. Not just against Karoline but other clients with conservative leanings. Ethan, the quiet employee, was commended for cooperating with the inquiry, and the branch implemented new training on impartiality. Karoline felt a flicker of hope, though she knew one policy change wouldn't fix a fractured system. At home, she and Nicholas talked late into the night, planning how to shield Nico from the polarization they saw growing. "We teach him truth," Karoline said, her voice firm. "Not left, not right, just what's right." Nicholas nodded, pulling her close. "And we teach him to fight like his mom." Karoline smiled, but her mind drifted to the IRS lobby, to Melissa's sneer, to the moment she'd dialed Trump. She'd stood for justice, but the scar of injustice lingered. She looked at Nico's photo on the fridge, his gap-toothed grin a promise of tomorrow. For him, she'd keep fighting, not for headlines, but for a world where fairness wasn't just a sign on a wall. Weeks later, Karoline stood at a community event in Virginia, invited to speak on resilience. The crowd was mixed. Some wore MAGA hats. Others carried signs about unity. She stepped to the microphone, her IRS notes tucked in her pocket like a talisman. "I faced bias at the IRS," she said, her voice clear. "Not because of my job, but because of my beliefs. I didn't want to fight, but I had to. For truth, for fairness. We all deserve that, no matter who we vote for." The crowd listened, some nodding, others skeptical. She didn't expect to win them all, but she saw a few faces soften, a few hands clap. It was enough. Backstage, an older woman too, her eyes kind. "You reminded me to stand up, even when it's hard," she said. Karoline smiled, her heart lifting. Driving home, she thought of Melissa, wondering where she was now. She hoped she'd learned, grown, but that wasn't her burden. Her burden was Nico, Nicholas, the values she carried. The IRS was one battle, but life was a war for truth. She'd fight it, one step at a time, with courage and clarity. As the DC lights twinkled ahead, Karoline felt ready for whatever came next. Truth, she knew, was worth it.